We begin this hour with some crucial dispatches from the front lines of the citizens' resistance, your resistance, that has taken shape over these past months as Donald Trump, complicit Republicans have waged relentless attacks on our democratic institutions. And that brings us this morning to the town of Cape May, New Jersey. Might seem like an unlikely front line of the resistance, yet every Saturday, a small but dedicated group known as the Bridge Brigade gathers at the local pedestrian overpass with protest signs, refusing to let their neighbors forget that their democracy is under siege. The first gathering in March drew maybe 10 people. Since then, they've shown up nearly every Saturday, rain or shine. Now they average about 20 people. On the 4th of July, nearly 30 turned out. It's not a lot of people. It's not glamorous. It doesn't make national headlines. But it is resistance. And those protesters are persistent. Their goal is not simply the time-honored tradition of protest. It is also community building. Their weekly presence is a civic drumbeat, a reminder that Trump's power is not inevitable, nor is it impenetrable. It is a reminder that they will not get used to what is happening, and that people still care enough to show up. It may seem like a small gesture, but few of the greatest human-powered civil rights movements in history were sustained by one or even several grand moments. Movements, protests, and democracy itself endure because of the steady commitment of ordinary people. Proof that the quest for freedom, equality, and liberty and the will to resist in defense of those things is stronger than any effort to silence it. It's not just protests. Civic courage comes in many forms. Small acts of defiance add up. There's the citizen who refuses to look away when ICE comes for a neighbor. The teacher who makes every child feel welcome and valued. The organizers knocking on doors to speak face to face with voters, making sure Medicaid cuts can't be buried under spin or from online disinformation. Together, these acts keep us from sliding into normalization. Together, these acts hold us all accountable to one another. Focusing only on the outcome misses the point. Because every single wrench thrown into the authoritarian wheel slows it down and rips up its gears. Philosophers Michael Brownstein and Alex Madva warn in the New York Times that the danger isn't in losing. The danger is in doing nothing. Inaction is defeat. It allows strong men to rewrite reality unchallenged. Losing loudly, they argue, preserves a record of dissent. It shifts public opinion. It keeps the contest alive. As they put it, quote, when people fight principled battles that they know they may lose, others pay attention. The Texas Democrats' stand gave us their cause time to move the needle of public perception. Their battle invigorated a nationwide conversation about how elected leaders can resist America's anti-democratic turn. Texas Democrats fought a battle they almost certainly expected to lose in order to help the rest of us grasp the stakes of current events. Their choice reflected a core tenet of collective action. They demonstrated for those of us who believe in free and fair elections and in democracy itself that there are moments when we cannot wait around for someone else to do something. So, now, Texas Democrats walking out on gerrymanders didn't stop Republicans from rigging the map, but they inspired other states to fight fire with their own redistricting maps. The civil rights hero John Lewis did not see immediate change when he marched in Selma in 1965, but he and those who marched with him forced a nation to reckon with the violence that stood in the way of democracy. Today, these small acts of resistance are unfolding across America, carried out by ordinary people far from the halls of power. In Manhattan, the city comptroller, Brad Lander, and other activists have been showing up to immigration court to observe ICE proceedings. In June, Lander was arrested after linking arms with a man who agents were trying to detain. Now he's urging migrants to skip court hearings altogether, calling them abduction traps. But here's the thing. This isn't Brad Lander's job. He's the New York City comptroller. He was there as a citizen, albeit a citizen with some authority. But going to court to bear witness and stand in solidarity with undocumented immigrants is something open to all of us. It's something an increasing number of Americans are, in fact, doing. For some Americans, the resistance has gone beyond quiet protest. Ali Mistal observes that at all points in history, there are people who are willing to break the law when the law is evil. Martin Luther King Jr., in his famous letter from Birmingham jail, addressed that moral challenge directly in response to 8 white clergymen who had denounced his nonviolent protests as the work of an extremist. King wrote, quote, "There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience. You express a great deal of anxiety over our willingness to break laws. There is certainly a legitimate concern. One may well ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? The answer lies in the fact that there are 2 types of laws, just and unjust. One has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. I would agree with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all. I submit that an individual who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and who willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice is in reality expressing the highest respect for law. Americans are also fighting for their democracy in town halls across the country, where citizens are holding their leaders' feet to the fire and demanding answers of them. Joining me now is the Democratic State Senator of Michigan, Mallory McMorrow. She represents the state's 8th district and is also a candidate for the U.S. Senate in Michigan. Representative, great to see you. Thank you for, Senator, thank you for joining us on the show. Let's talk about this. We have pivoted from what I thought was a relatively useless discussion since the election about whether Democrats should be more moderate or more centrist or more progressive or whatever the case is, into this discussion about who will stand up to the injustice that we are seeing unfolding in our country.
That's exactly right. This is a question of, are you going to fight or not? Do you care or not? People are scared and they are angry and they are hurting right now. And the future of our party is going to be decided by who steps up and fights for this moment. I want to just lay out here in the state of Michigan, yes, I am running for U.S. Senate in the moment, but we also are in the middle of a budget showdown on the state level. And buried in the House Republican budget that just came out, this is a narrow Republican House majority in our state, is boilerplate language that Matt Hall put into this budget that would require the Attorney General to seek legislative approval before filing any lawsuit against the Trump administration. Michigan is a state with a Democratic Attorney General, Dana Nessel, who has been filing lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, and they are trying to kneecap her in this moment. So we're going to talk about a campaign, absolutely. But anybody watching in Michigan, I need you to go to michiganvotes.org, find your state legislator and call them right now to say that this is unacceptable, and you will vote them out of office if they kneecap our AG.
This is interesting because that is one way that Americans, in my opinion, are ahead of political parties in terms of protest. Part of it is the rallies. Part of it is the No Kings. Part of it is showing up at these town hall meetings. Part of it is calling your member of Congress, your state representatives, and telling them so that they hear it. I mean, night after night, we see example of people getting shouted down and having to leave their town hall meetings because their nonsense is not being bought by the voter.
That is exactly right. What I tell people, we have done dozens of events all across the state as I am campaigning, and I tell everybody, the fight is not in Washington. We need to turn Washington into Michigan. We need Washington to fight more like Michigan, because what I see is people who have never protested, have never rallied, have never called an elected official, who are coming out of the woodwork, even in the reddest areas of our state. I was down in Hillsdale. That is home of Hillsdale College, really the home of Project 2025. A lot of the architecture of Project 2025 came out of Hillsdale. There were organizers there. It was only a dozen of them, but they organized a protest. They stood outside of City Hall. They were terrified. But what they noticed is that every time somebody drove by who saw them, there was somebody who honked, there was somebody who waved, who didn't believe that there were people like them in Hillsdale County. That's where the fight is. And we need the future leaders of our party to be on the ground with the fighters.
So in the next hour, I'm going to be talking about little protests where there are 10 or 20 or 30 people. What if people watching this today were to say, hey, I can double that 10 or 20 or 30, and next week we double that, and next week we double that? At some point, it becomes too big to ignore. There are more of us. When I say us, I mean people who want democracy than them.
That's exactly right. And bravery can feel like a small action, but it is really brave to step out of your house in a place where you feel like you are alone, to be that first person holding a sign where you become two, or then you become four, or then you become eight. And then all of a sudden, exactly to your point, there are more of us and people see us and they know that there is somebody who cares about them and sees them and is fighting for them. And that's how we win. That's how we beat this Republican attempt to gut our elections, to gut our institutions, and we take back power. And then, by the way, when we take back power, we need a party who is not afraid to use it when people give it to us.
Yeah, let's just lean into that for a second, because there does seem to be a bit of a disconnect between, certainly at the Washington level, federal Democratic leadership and lots of people who might or might not be members of the Democratic Party, might not see themselves as Democrats, but they understand that there's one party left right now to be able to fight autocracy. Feels to me like people are ahead of the leaders.
They 100% are. You know, I cannot tell you how many people, as I travel across the state, express just anger, outright anger at a party that for years fundraised off of the idea that Roe might fall, talking about reproductive rights. And then when they had all the power on the federal level to codify Roe, did they do it? No. They let Roe fall, they let the Dobbs decision come down, and it was up to states and people like here in Michigan who organized, who collected more signatures than for any other ballot initiative in state history to get reproductive.
We begin this hour not in Washington, not in some grand courtroom, but on a small pedestrian bridge in Cape, New Jersey, where a handful of ordinary citizens are proving that resistance doesn't need a spotlight to matter. Week after week, rain or shine, the Bridge Brigade shows up with their signs, their voices and their courage. 10 people turned into 20. On July 4th, it became 30. Not a crowd, not a headline, but resistance, real resistance. Because here is the truth. Democracy isn't saved in a single sweeping moment. It's saved in these small, relentless acts. The teacher who protects every child. The neighbor who refuses to stay silent when ICE comes knocking. The voter who shows up at a town hall and demands answers. Each act a wrench in the gear of authoritarian power. Texas Democrats walked out knowing they would lose, but their defiance lit a fire across the nation. John Lewis didn't see change overnight in Selma, but he forced America to see its own injustice. That is the power of showing up. That is the power of 15. That is the power of fighting even when victory isn't guaranteed. And today, across this country, from bridges to courtrooms, from red towns to blue cities, ordinary Americans are refusing to surrender. They are saying, not on our watch. The danger is not losing. The danger is doing nothing. Because silence hands power to the strong man. But every horn that honks, every sign that waves, every shout in every town, square, it all says the same thing. There are more of us than there are four of them. And that is how democracy fights. It's not over yet. That is just a beginning. Stay tuned with us for more. Thank you for watching.